So about 3 months ago, I sat in my office at night. I wasn't really sleeping very well, and because my mind was running. And it was running because I had just read some policy documents on the Ontario Human Rights Commission website in relationship to Bill C-16, and at the same time I had heard that the University of Toronto HR and Equity Vice President had decided to make anti-unconscious bias training mandatory for her staff, which I find appalling, and still find appalling. And I would recommend that if any of you are asked or required to have your unconscious biases adjusted, that you might note to yourself that by agreeing to do so, you have agreed that you're guilty. And I wouldn't recommend that. Anyways, I was mostly trying to straighten out my thoughts on these issues, and that's usually what I do when I speak, because I have a good reputation as a speaker, and I think there's two reasons for that. One is I don't ever speak to a group, I always speak to individuals. I'm not speaking to the group, I'm speaking to individual people. And I'm not telling you what's right, because I don't know what's right. What I'm trying to do is to formulate my thoughts more clearly. And it's helpful to do that in speech, even in front of an audience, because it's a dialogue with an audience. If you watch the individuals, then you can tell if they're following you, or mostly whether they're following you, if they can understand the line of the argumentation. And some of them will be shaking their heads, and some of them will be nodding, and some of them will be looking puzzled, in which case you have to kind of reformulate. And that's how to think, and when you're speaking to people, it's okay to tell them what you know, but better to show them how you think. And that means you're going to stumble around like an idiot some of the time, because you're trying to grapple with things. And what I try to do for my students is to model the process of grappling with things, because that's what you do when you think. And Norman pointed out that you can be right, or you can try to get smarter. And to be right, then you convince people that you're right, but to try to get smarter, you find out why you're wrong. And so I decided a long time ago that one of the ways to deal with my authoritarian tendencies, let's say, was to make friends with what I don't know instead of what I do know. And that's a whole different way of looking at the world, and it's got its pain, because you're always trying to figure out more or less why you're a biased moron, and that's a very long list of you have a very long list of reasons for that, and then you have to find out why you're wrong. And as a short-term mechanism for attaining psychological stability, I wouldn't recommend it. But as a long-term process where you're trying to make things work better in the medium to long term, then it's the only way. But it's easy to sacrifice the future for the present, although it's kind of the reverse of the way you should do things. So anyways, I made these videos, pretty amateur videos, and the lighting wasn't very good, and there was a bunch of things wrong with them. And but one of the things I've been wondering about for the last 3 months is just what happened? Like, what's going on here? This is crazy. And I've been accused of a lot of things, some of which are no doubt true, but I've been accused of being a racist, profiteering, and I guess the other one was scaremongering. Yeah, that's the other one, scaremongering. And so, of course, I've been wondering if those things are true, because it's not like my heart is as pure as the driven snow, hardly, and everyone has biases and all of that. So, and I also, while this unfolded, had a group of friends who were definitely critics, who were watching everything I was doing, and letting me know pretty forthrightly when I was being arrogant, and when I was looked kind of disheveled, and when my arguments were just clear as they could be, and and these were smart people, and their comments were very incisive. And then of course I had all the blowback, and I was paying attention to it, because, well, you should pay attention to such things. And I do pay attention to things, that's the thing. I actually pay attention to things. And if I'm embroiled in a controversy, even if it's a problem in my home, I try to get to the damn bottom of it. And you know, the bottom of things is not a pretty place to look. And so, you know, when you're arguing with someone at home, even someone you love, you'll notice that your argument can get out of hand, pretty quick. So if you're arguing with your wife or your husband, you know, and it depends on how volatile you are, of course, but you know, you start arguing about some little thing, and then you come to understand pretty quick that it's actually not about that little thing at all. That little thing is associated with, you know, a little bigger thing underneath that, and maybe that's associated with even a bigger thing under that, and you know, soon you're taking each other apart for, assuming you've been married for 20 years, for all the stupid things you've done to each other over the last 20 years, and it doesn't have to end there, and that's not pleasant. It's really hard to bind a conversation so it doesn't go everywhere, you know. So one thing you can do, if you're talking to someone about something you disagree with, someone you love, you can tell them a bunch of good things about what they've been doing, which you actually believe, and then just say, well, but there's this little problem here, and I'd just like it adjusted in a minor way, and maybe that'll, you know, sort things out a bit between us, and then maybe you don't fall into that stupid pit, which is really easy to fall into, and you know, which certainly can lead to divorce, among other things. And so a huge part of the issue always is just exactly what is this about?